Hello my dear friends, you're in the military with summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. The most important thing is that the Ukrainians made another attempt to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, and the sources reported that between the morning of the 29th of June and the morning of the 30th of June of 2026, the Ukrainians used more than 800 of drones to attack the territory of Russia. Just during the night, the Ukrainians used 419 drones to attack the territory of Russia, and this attack was repelled. So this is the most important piece of news. The Russians have repelled this attack almost without consequences for their enterprises and for their positions. This is a very important thing, because we see that during the previous 15 days we haven't seen even a single attack from the Ukrainian side that brought more or less a result for the armed forces of Ukraine. We're not talking about missiles attacks in the direction of the cities of Volgograd and Voronezh. We're talking about drone strikes. We see that the effectiveness of drone strikes of the armed forces of Ukraine has dropped significantly since the Russians began destroying and attacking gas stations, parking sites and trucks through the eastern and through the southern parts of Ukraine. The Ukrainians launched dozens of drones, and once again the Ukrainians were trying to attack the city of Moscow, and during the night we received lots of videos on this matter. We received lots of drones flying in the direction of the capital of the Russian Federation, but the thing is that the Russians managed to intercept every single drone that was heading towards the capital of the Russian Federation, the city of Moscow. The Russians were using air defense forces, the Russians were using missiles, and the Russians were using electronic warfare equipment. For example, in this video we can see a drone that was flying somewhere over the Moscow region, and as a result of air defense work, the Russians managed to destroy this drone without any consequences for the situation on the ground. So this is the reality. This is something new. Of course, the Ukrainians expected that their mid-range and long-range strikes would change the situation on the ground, and during May and during the first half of June of 2026, probably we saw something like a turning point in the conflict between Ukraine and the Russian Federation, but at this very moment the Russians decided to begin total destruction of gas stations and parking sites through the eastern parts of Ukraine and through the southern parts of Ukraine, and this Russian very fast decision forced the Ukrainians to move their launching sites of drones further in the direction of the central and the western parts of Ukraine, which means that the Russians right now have more time to detect Ukraine's drones, because between launching sites and the border we can see up to 300 kilometers, which means that the Russians have several hours before they detect Ukraine's drones, and several hours before the Russians create a tactic or prepare themselves to prepare this or that massive attack. So this is the situation, this is the reality, and this is the reason why Zelensky and Ukraine are trying to find a solution how to intensify the production of missiles, because when talking about missiles, if Ukrainians use the central part of Ukraine to launch missiles deep inside of the territory of Russia, from this perspective, most likely the Ukrainians still would have some chances to hit some enterprises and military positions of Russia and to show some performance. Now let's move further. Once again, the Ukrainians during the previous night launched one of the biggest attacks in the direction of the city of Moscow, but most of the drones were once again either destroyed or intercepted. As a result of interception of Ukraine's drones, several of them fell down on the residential area and several buildings were destroyed. Furthermore, the Ukrainians were attacking in the southern direction, and the Ukrainians were trying to attack the city of Novorossiysk. And as for this territory, we also received during the night lots of videos how the Russian air defense forces were repelling the Ukrainian attack, and as a result of this air fight, as you can see, the Russians managed to destroy and intercept also every single drone that was launched by the Ukrainian side. Another important thing worth attention is that yesterday in the evening, for the first time probably since the end of the 15th of June of 2026, pro-Ukrainian sources have published report that the massive attack from the Russian side is imminent during the next 72 hours. hours. I would like to remind you that the last massive attack carried out by Russians took place between the 14th and the 15th of June of 2026. Now it's almost 2 weeks passed since the previous massive attack, and probably by the end of this week the Russians may carry out not just a missile but a mega attack through the entire territory of Ukraine using thousands of drones and probably hundreds of missiles. Moving further, let's discuss now the Russian attack. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning reported that the Russians used 154 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine during the previous night, and as usually the Russians were attacking gas stations, parking sites and the logistics of the armed forces of Ukraine. Let's discuss everything in details, and first let's talk with the northern direction. We have changes on the ground, as you can see, through the most northeastern parts of the Sumy region along MO2 road, and these are the changes on the ground. This is the end of the 29th of June and this is the beginning of the 30th of June of 2026. The Russians improved their positions in the area of the settlement by the name of Ulanov. Basically, the Russians approached the settlement from the south and from the southeast. As for the massive attack, the Russians destroyed a gas station to the north of the settlement of Gluhov. This gas station was destroyed, and we have these pictures that were published by local sources. Here we have the gas station that was completely destroyed. Several days ago, the gas station in the central part of the settlement of Gluhov was destroyed as well. We have these pictures published by local sources. So now we can say that it seems that the Russians have destroyed every single gas station in the most northeastern parts of the Sumy region, which means that if the armed forces of Ukraine want to send troops or forces in the direction of the most northeastern parts of the Sumy region, either they need to have a lots of gasoline, or this is going to be another one-way ticket direction for vehicles, of course. Now let's talk about the Sumy direction. During the previous 12 hours, as you can see, the map was adjusted significantly. First of all, the Russians continue attacking the city of Sumy with bombs. This is a very important situation, and the Russians have possibilities to attack the city of Sumy with FPV drones. In this video, we can see another object of energy infrastructure that was hit by Russians as a result of the FPV drone attack. So this energy substation was damaged. After this attack, power outages occurred through the city, and the Russians, as you can see, have improved their position significantly through the second defense layer of the city of Sumy. And these are the changes on the ground between the previous 3 days. This is the end of the 28th of June of 2026. This is the end of the 29th of June, and we received the report that Russians entered the settlement of Malininovka from the north, and that the Russians improved their positions around the settlement of Khotyn from the north as well. As of the morning of the 30th of June of 2026, we received the report that Russians almost physically cut the road between Khotyn and the settlement of Kondrativka, where the Russians also improved their positions in the central part of the settlement. And the most important thing is that today, for the first time since the beginning of the Sumy offensive operation, the group of forces north stated that currently the clashes are taking place on the streets of the settlement of Khotyn, which means that the battle for Khotyn begins, and we see that the Sumy offensive operation is gaining momentum, and this is one of the most important offensives for Russians, as we can see. Moving further, the city of Kharkiv. During the previous 12 hours, additional explosions and attacks were recorded through the city of Kharkiv itself. Here we have a very big explosion somewhere in the central part of the settlement. The Russians attacked some military enterprise. So this enterprise was damaged by Russians, and another gas station was destroyed along MO3 road. We are talking about this territory. Here we have pictures that were published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see the consequences of attack. Here we can see the overnight fire, and here we can see fire crews that were trying to extinguish the fire. So another gas station was attacked and destroyed around the city of Kharkiv, and the city of Kharkiv has become even more isolated than we used to see the isolation yesterday. Moving further in the southern direction, the Russians continue attacking the territory between the cities of Nikopol and Dnipro. The Russians continue attacking vehicles along R73 road. In this video we can see civilians moving along the Nikopol-Dnipro road, and here we can see probably a fuel truck that was attacked and destroyed by Russians. As for the territory of the city of Nikopol itself, yesterday the sources reported that the Russians attacked this territory, and as a result of attack, as we can see, lots of trucks were destroyed by Russians. So the Ukrainians were using this territory to store trucks that most likely the Ukrainians were using as drone carriers that are able to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, and this parking site was destroyed with trucks inside. So this is the situation with massive attack from the Russian side. We see that the effectiveness of Ukraine's attack has dropped significantly, but at the same time we see that the Russians stopped using the tactics of massive attack. The Russians tried to improve their daily attacks, and we see that in comparison with the Ukrainian side, the Russian daily attacks, the effectiveness of the Russian daily attacks has improved significantly in comparison with the Ukrainian side. Now let's continue with the situation on the ground, and telling the truth, right before we started making this video, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the group of forces East made lots of very interesting statements, but we didn't have enough of time to adjust them up, so that is why these changes on the ground we will discuss during the next evening update. So what happened right before we started making the video? First of all, and the most important thing, the Russians, according to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, have captured the settlement of Malininovka on the Ukraine side of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. And before the next video, we will adjust the map like this. This is a very important situation. The Russians create more and more powerful foothold on the Ukrainian side of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, and basically the distance between this village and the settlement of Kramatorsk is already less than 8 kilometers, more precisely 7 kilometers and 260 meters, which means that the battle for the city of Kramatorsk may start even faster and earlier than could be expected, and maybe even earlier than the battle for the city of Dushkovka, because most likely from this foothold the Russians would continue their offensive operation. They would try to maintain the territory, to maintain the line, and they would try to take under complete control the villages of Nikopol and Rivne. So these territories along this red line is the next target of the armed force of the Russian Federation, and if Russians are able to establish complete control over these territories, the Russians, so the most important thing, would be able to establish complete fire control over the main lines between the cities of Slaviansk, Kramatorsk, Dushkovka and Lysevo-Dushkovka, and basically the monolith of Ukraine's defense through this area would be cut by Russians into several smaller pieces, and the Russians would handle with every single piece separately. Meanwhile, the Russians continue their offensive operation. One of the most important battles are ahead of the Russians, the battle for the village of Mykolaievka, which is basically a part of the Slaviansk agglomeration, the eastern parts of this agglomeration. And during the previous 12 hours, more artillery and aviation strikes were recorded through this territory. The Russians continue the process of softening defense of Ukrainians in this area. Now we are moving further, and we are moving to the Zaporizhzhia direction. Another important batch of updates we received from this area. This morning, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the group of forces East also reported that Russians, as a result of the offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlements of Lysne and Rivne. So these territories were captured by Russians according to the group of forces East, and before the next video, we will adjust the map like this. We will color all these territories under complete Russian control, and this is already something like a breakthrough, and this is already the beginning of the Orekhov or Yurkovka-Tavrisky cauldron operation. The Russians would continue their offensive operation further towards the villages of Lubetskaya, Novosolonova, Chervony Yar, and many more different towns and villages, with the purpose to cut the logistics of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area and to establish fire control over the logistics that goes further in the western direction along NO8 roads. So the battle for the city of Orekhov is intensifying, and most likely in coming days we'll receive more updates on this matter from the group of forces East. The situation for the Ukrainians through the Zaporizhzhia direction is becoming critical. And that's it for the short video. The military summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.